is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you once again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone, and with me as always is the editor-in-chief of Unwinnable.com. Unlike the black sarcophagus in Egypt that hasn't been opened in 1,000 years, Stu opens his wallet for eBay. How's it going, Stu?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm great.
What's the good word?
What's the good word? The good word is we're back again. We are going to... God, I'm going to try to pronounce this right now. We are going to talk about Masks of Nyarlathotep today.
You faked it pretty good there, I think.
You know, words like this is my Klaatu Barada tie moment. Masks of Nyarlathotep.
Yeah, close enough.
A tep?
Tep. Hotep.
So we're going to talk about Masks of Nyarlathotep today. I've been practicing. I've been practicing saying this, like, you know, when I was reading the Drizzt books, and I think I said that right.
Yeah, you said, I think so.
When I was reading those books, the word Menzoberranzan kept coming up.
Hey, you got it.
Well, I practiced it. Every time I would say, the first like 20 chapters, every time it come up, I'd say Menzoberranzan. And I'd say it out loud because I would stumble over it even as I was reading it. So today we're going to talk about Masks of Nyarlathotep.
Okay, yeah, you're like right there. You just, it's just funny.
It's tough. And I was at home and I was talking to people like, what are you going over today? And I was like, we're going to go over that Cthulhu game that we played. No, say it. No, I'm saving it. So Masks of Nyarlathotep.
Yeah, you're in the 99th percentile.
I feel like it's close enough for rock and roll. So we're going to talk about masks today, and we're also going to talk about what we're playing. I'm just going to call it masks. You know, if you're about a minute 40 into this podcast, you know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a fun game that you guys played on Friday nights without me because I went out to a concert, and we're going to talk about a new game that I know you're very excited about.
I am.
Now, what's the name of the new game you're excited about?
Spire. The subtitle is The City Must Fall.
Okay, I'm immediately sold on this. We are going to save that for a little bit later. Yeah. First, let's talk about what you guys played on Friday night.
The Blood of an Englishman. It's a 2-player game. It's very small. So let me back up a little bit.
Right.
I bought this because I like the cover art.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, how many times have you bought in a book because you like the cover art?
Lots.
And
That's
how many times has the book delivered on the cover art?
Not always.
Right. So did this game deliver on the cover art?
It did. I got it on sale, too, which was really nice. A big board game distro was closing, and it was one of the few things that I could get from their site as they were doing their closeout sale.
Oh, they have like a fire sale?
Yeah. So I bought it. I didn't have high hopes for it. We almost never have game nights where we can play 2-player games.
Of course.
You know, because usually more people show up.
You know, usually at the clubhouse we have 4 to 6 people.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's 5 people and one dude just doesn't want to play, just wants to hang out and have a couple beers, which is cool.
Exactly. So it's like a solitaire, but it's competitive. One person plays Jack the Giant Killer. The other plays the Giant.
Oh, cool.
So you set up 50 cards and there's in 5 stacks of 10.
Right.
The Giant is trying to position cards so that it spells out fee, fi, fo, fum.
Okay.
Jack is trying to pull cards from those stacks and build his beanstalks to get treasures.
Okay.
If he gets 3 treasures, he wins. If I get fee, fi, fo, fum, either vertically or horizontally, I win. Jack gets 3 moves in terms of positioning cards. He can move them from the front to the back or from the front to another stack in the front. The Giant has 3 options. He can move a stack of 4 cards anywhere from the front to another front. He can remove a card completely from the game.
Right.
But the Giant only gets to go once. So you're competing against each other, obviously. And there's this weird power differential. In the beginning of the game, as Jack has all the power because he's got moving all these cards around. But there's this subtle switch where all of a sudden the Giant has all this power at the back half of the game.
Right.
And it becomes really hard for Jack to continue to bounce between offense and defense. It was a surprisingly complicated game.
So it sounds challenging.
Yeah, it was a little bit of solitaire, a little bit of chess.
I do love the idea of 2-player games, like Boss Monster. We played Boss Monster a little while ago, and I had a lot of fun with that because it's you against someone else trying to build a dungeon, run through that dungeon.
Yeah.
You know, you can't always get like 4 people to play a game.
It's true.
You know, so it's nice to have 1 and sometimes 2-player games where you could still be entertained without having to sit in front of a television.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of like the idea of the solo game, but I just don't have time to do it.
Right.
You could play Scythe solo.
You told me that. And that seems like a lot of setup to play with yourself.
Moving on.
Yep. So How much is this game?
I got it for $12. I think it retails for like 18. It's super cheap.
That's great.
And it's super fast too. I mean, 20-minute games, so you could rip through a game really fast and move on to something else, or kind of get into the nitty-gritty and learn it really fast. We played 2 sessions in 40 minutes, and we both kind of got the game and wanted to play more, but we were tired. So.
See, I love that. I love that there are other style games like that where there's a place for that.
Yeah.
You know, in the game world, you have so many different types of games and so many games that, like Scythe is so big in scale.
Yeah.
It's cool that there are things that you could put in. I saw the size of the box. It could fit in your backpack. It could fit in your back pocket.
I mean, yeah, if you just take the cards out, you could stick them in your pocket.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that you could actually play probably on a plane.
Yeah.
With the person sitting next to you. Hopefully they're not a stranger. And if
That'd
they
be
are,
weird.
then you've made a friend.
Yeah. Don't do that.
And we're going to move on to the meat of the show right now, which is a game that, you know, when we talked about in episode 2, Cthulhu, this is something that's spun out of Cthulhu, and this is the actual running project that we had going with this specific game with our group of friends, and it is harrowing. And the game is called Masks of Nyarlathotep.
I like the fact that you call it a project rather than a campaign, which I think is a word that sort of encompasses the scale of the thing. It's a huge campaign. And I mean, we have like notebooks filled with notes. We have piles of paperwork.
Well, yeah, that's why I called it a project. We had a murder board.
We had the bulletin board with all the red threads and the photos. And
it's a game unlike anything I've ever played in different various role-playing settings because it's so deep. And so nuanced. You know, I looked at the one book that you let us see, which is, I guess, the player's handbook.
Yeah.
However, there's other boxes on Stu's shelf. There's bigger books. The maps are so historically accurate and detailed. It's almost overwhelming. Like, for me, I don't know that I could run it myself.
It was a lot.
Because, I mean, I'm a very organized person, but this is like, when I call it a project, it's a labor of love. So, Stu, tell us a little bit about Masks.
Okay, so Masks of Nyarlathotep is not the first Call of Cthulhu campaign, but it is probably the best Call of Cthulhu campaign for the era. I think there's other stuff that's come out since that might be better. But Masks definitely has a bit of a reputation for being a legendary campaign. It came out first in 1984 in a box set. It's written by Lynn Willis and Larry DiTillo. As much as Sandy Peterson, a guiding hand in the second half of Call of Cthulhu, just sort of defining what the game was and how it prioritized things and sort of pushed it in a pulpier direction. Larry DiTillo is also a RPG writer, but he also wrote scripts for like cartoons like He-Man and stuff, which is kind of rad.
Really?
Yeah.
Which is funny to me, and I don't know if funny is the right word, but when I think about the horror in Masks versus like the sunshine and rainbows and feelings in He-Man, that's a wide berth.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, go on.
Yeah, so weird. The campaign itself is a globe-trotting, conspiracy, pulpy story mystery. It begins in New York, where your good friend Jackson Elias, who's an NPC who you should have introduced earlier, is murdered. And you have to find out who did it and why, and it's connected to the activities of a expedition to Egypt called the Carlisle Expedition. It was a bunch of rich white folks who went to Egypt, dug up some stuff, then went to Kenya, then disappeared. So these two storylines are intertwined. It takes you to London, Cairo, Kenya, Shanghai, and in later editions there was a final chapter in Australia that was excised and eventually found its way back into later editions of the game. It's huge. It's crazy big. My friend Ed was recently reading through the book since we completed it.
Right.
And he's sort of overwhelmed. He was reading it and not understanding how I ran it, because there's no real guidance for it, especially in a modern sense. They're basically just laying out the story and giving you threads that you have to kind of put together and tailor not only their characters, but where they're at in the investigation. It's a whole lot of information to manage.
You know, Ed is exceptional at taking notes.
Yeah.
Now, in D&D campaigns in the past, Ed would be the guy who, you know, normally when your DM's like, oh, you better write that down on your character sheet. Yeah. Well, Ed actually keeps a running tally of everything that everyone has.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you still kind of lose stuff. If you're the kind of person who just kind of futzes around and just, you know, writes on the character sheet or like scribbles something like, well, what was this sword supposed to do? You are going to have a hell of a time in Masks, because there is a lot to it and a lot of, you know, even though he was taking the notes for the group, we still needed to take our own reference notes so we could actually talk to him as kind of like he was almost like an oracle in a way. Like, but if you didn't know the question asked, you know, we're lost. So it's a game where you have to actually pay attention to what's going on.
I think he filled 4 pocket notebooks.
He did 4 moleskins, right?
Yeah.
Front to back.
Yeah.
Every single inch of every page he filled in. I mean, how many games did we play?
It was over 30 sessions. It was a year and a half.
We really did it seriously. We went, almost every Friday for a year and a half, give or take a few weeks here and there.
Yeah.
We pounded through it. Now, when we started, though, let's roll it back a little bit. Mm-hmm. The one-shot. Where did the one-shot come from that we did? The Haunted Party? The force field around it?
Oh, well, that was... So the first couple games that we played, they were just one-shot Call of Cthulhu scenarios that I just used as an excuse to kind of get you guys together and to introduce Jackson early, so that there was some sort of... I wanted you to guys know him, so when he gets murdered, you would be kind of like, oh, that kind of sucks.
Oh, so it just didn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so for me, dear listener, this is kind of me getting the director's cut of a game that I played for a year and a half, so you're going to have to indulge me a little bit here. So that's actually pretty cool. Now, I will say for people who maybe want to get involved and run something like a Call of Cthulhu, the one-shots that we did are great. The one-shots that we did are so concise and so tight, and they're very well written. So when you're dropped into this world, it's spooky from the get-go. You're really invested in it from the word jump. So that said, I think now knowing that you did that before you started the campaign, I'd actually recommend that to anyone thinking about running these games, because it's actually a good little hook where you kind of built a false sense of security, if I'm being honest, with the people who were playing, because we got through that first adventure and no one died. No one really got that badly hurt.
It was spooky, but yeah, nobody got messed up.
And I'm like, oh man, we can hang. This is great. And 3 weeks later, my character was dead.
Yeah.
Deader than disco. Got his heart ripped out from across the street with a spell. It was about as graphic as you could imagine it.
That was my first kill of the campaign, and it was a good one.
Yeah, and Stu sent me a text message afterwards, and all it said was, Kalima.
One of the reasons that it's cool to bring up Masks of Nyarlathotep is the fact that Chaosium just re-released it for the 7th edition rules. And it's bigger and better and expanded. And I just finished running this campaign last October, and I kind of want to run it again. It's crazy talk. No sane person should be saying that. But that's how good a job I think they did. It's going to be a 2-volume book. You can get the PDFs now online. Runs 666 pages, which I think is a lovely little detail.
That's a nice little touch.
One of the things that they did is they inserted a pre-adventure. So I'm going to bring this back a second to our game. One of the things that I did was use the Masks of Nyarlathotep Companion, which is this gigantic fan-made companion book.
Now, is that the book that you sent me to try to get for you at Gen Con?
Yes.
Yeah,
and there were like 20 copies of it.
I just want to take make a little digression here. So I've been going the last 4 years, so this is big. I love going to Gen Con. I don't have a lot of time to go to all the conventions because I do have my hands in a lot of pies. I'm making podcasts now. That said, when I feel bad because I've listened to other episodes as I'm editing them, and I keep hearing myself, oh, I went to Gen Con. It's like my one friend who actually lives in Canada, and every time I talk to him, he's like, well, in Canada. So I get it. I say Gen Con a lot.
It's okay. At least you can pronounce it.
Oh, God. Thankfully they shortened it. So that said, Stu sends me to Gen Con. He's like, hey, can you do me a favor? He's like, they only have a certain number of copies, and it's going to be at the Chaosium booth. Now, Chaosium booth is awesome. The Chaosium booth, they have so many great books there. And now we are not sponsored by Chaosium.
Yeah.
We hopefully, fingers crossed, one day, someone give us something. Yeah. We're fans. And the people who work the booth are always super nice, super knowledgeable, and they have such, even if you're not going to run any of these games, they've got art books. They've got like their versions of Monster Manual. What is a Chaosium Monster Manual called? A Bestiary?
I'm not sure to what you refer.
There's a book that George bought. It was all the monsters and Cthulhu.
Oh, yeah, the Field Guide.
Field Guide.
Yeah,
see?
So good.
That's a cool name for a monster book. So he's like, they only have a small number of copies. So I got up early. I was literally standing in front of the door that they would open. I knew where the booth was. I went right to the door that I would have to be standing to have a straight shot at the booth. So I am maybe conservatively 500 feet from the door that I was at. Literally, I'm being pushed against this door. I'm 500 feet from the door I was at to the table where they had that book. And by the time they opened the door and I walked the 500 feet, they were sold out.
It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
But anyway, this book is pretty cool. It's a little weird in that they're not really publishing it. I think you can get a PDF. The print run is done. I don't think they're ever going to reprint it.
Right. You got one, though, right?
I did eventually get one. I'm not going to tell you what I did to get one. But regardless, one of the cool things that they did in that book was they wrote a scenario where you and your friend Jackson, you go rescue Jackson from Peru.
Right.
It's actually not a mythos story. It's a bit of a red herring. It seems like it should be supernatural, but it isn't.
Right.
I ran that in the sessions before we started Masks of Nyarlathotep formally, and that worked really well. Tying that in to the new version of Masks of Nyarlathotep for 7th edition rules, Chaosium took that idea right down to the fact that it's in Peru, and they wrote up this gnarly, totally supernatural, pretty messed up scenario to start it all up. You run the game, you should have a couple sessions, then you have this thing in Peru with Jackson, and you guys are blood brothers after that.
Wow.
And it's so good.
And so then you actually really do care when Jackson gets whacked.
Yes. And I think
that's cool.
I think that there's different ways that you could go about it. Jackson is he's an interesting character. I would like to see what somebody would do running Masks of Nyarlathotep campaign where Jackson doesn't die.
Okay.
I think that you could do it. He's an interesting guy, and you could do things differently with it. But then again, I've read this stupid campaign like 18 times, so I've thought about it far too much.
So, no, that's good. That's a good...
There's concern in your eyes when I said that.
I'm like, 18 times?
At least.
Wow, that's got to read really well. So, as a keeper of secrets,
yeah.
You've run Masks,
yeah.
Knowing that they have this new version of it, right? This gnarly new version. Knowing that we've all played it together, do you think you could run it again? Would we be bored? Because we kind of know what happens. Or is it like kind of a new adventure, a new story? Or is it just kind of a reskin of what they've done in the past with some new details?
That's something I would certainly want to try.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to do it right away because it's too fresh. I would give it a couple years for everybody to kind of forget.
Which is easy because 30-something sessions, lots of notes, we'll forget.
And in all fairness, two of the players, Ed and George, played Masks of Nyarlathotep. I ran it back in 7th grade with those guys. I ran it totally wrong. It ran it like D&D and it was garbage. But we did play it. I still have my penciled notes in the margins of my copy. So I know that we did it. I, who have a very good memory for stuff like this, have no recollection of it.
Okay.
And George and Ed didn't either. So it worked out. I think that if you put enough distance down, you could potentially run it again. There's enough new material. I haven't read through all of it. It's a very big book.
Right.
But the intro scenario and the way New York is structured, there's a lot more structure. And there's a lot more NPCs and a lot more ways to thread in unique stories.
Right.
So I think if everybody just made up new characters that were interesting, there's enough support there for it to work, especially if we switch up some things. And you got to remember, too, that the original campaign that I ran for you guys, it won't be the same because some of those details will change.
Right.
So spoilers, I guess, mute this part if you don't want to know this. But how do you spoil something that's 30 years old? Part of the game, in the early game, the guy who went off on the expedition has a sister.
Right.
You guys thought that she's rich. And he disappears and she gets everything. So you guys immediately thought that she was connected. And she's not. In the context of the way the campaign is written, she's not. In the context of how much you guys wanted it to be, if we ever got back to New York, she probably is.
Right.
So, and the game is always going to change to a certain degree depending on what you guys want. The way we ended it, too, with Jack Brady, that's not necessarily how it's written.
Right. And we really liked her for the crime.
Yeah.
We really liked her for the crime.
I feel like even though it's not in there, you should get rewarded for that because you guys really, really wanted it.
Right. Now, I feel from talking about this now, then I've just recently playing Tales from the Loop, where that's a sandbox.
Yeah.
This vibe to me was also similar to like a sandbox style game where there is rails, but we went off the rails a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And we went off in our own directions a lot. And I think you did a really good job of kind of always steering us back to the path.
Yeah.
That said, a lot of the fun came from we don't know what the hell's going on. Like, when you're on a dungeon crawl that there's an end to the dungeon.
Yeah.
This, we knew we had an ultimate end goal, but we could have done anything we wanted to get there.
Yeah.
So one thing I want you to chat me up about, first time keeper of secrets. Mm-hmm. Maybe you've dipped your toe in D&D. Maybe you've played Pathfinder or some other kind of RPG system. You've heard about this game. You want to give it a whirl. Would you start with just the basic Cthulhu or jump headfirst into Masks?
Oh, boy. So you mentioned it being a sandbox on rails, and that's a really good explanation for it. It is, I think, one of the earliest sandbox games where players have control over how they investigate it. You can go to any point in the matrix of settings and move the story around. There's no set order for the investigation, right?
Right.
Now, a game like Tales from the Loop, there's all sorts of ways that the game mitigates. It lowers the difficulty level for you running a Tales from the Loop game because there's only so many ways that things can go. And I don't want to get into that too deeply because I just want to make the point that Masks of Nyarlathotep does not do that. There's a huge amount of prep that you have to do. New York is easy because New York is the start. When we were playing it, as we were getting closer to wrapping up New York, I was terrified because I didn't know what you were going to do next.
We keep you guessing, man.
I've never experienced it on the scale of they could literally go anywhere in the world, and I need to be kind of prepared for that. There's certain parts of the game that are very on rails, and you need to set up your set pieces, but you don't really want to push the party to investigate in any order, because that's sort of their biggest the freedom in Masks of Nyarlathotep. That's the thing that makes it really special in that open world sense. I would not try running Masks of Nyarlathotep unless you're fairly experienced. I could actually probably think of maybe 2 or 3 D&D things that you could run to get a feel for managing something that big. I've done this for a long time, many years, and I feel like I've been getting better as I go. There were points where I struggled with all of the things that I had to manage to make Masks of Nyarlathotep good.
I agree, because I've been running games now for like 15 years. You've been running games a lot longer. I know you said 7th grade, you tried running this and you failed miserably because you ran it like D&D.
Yeah.
To me, reading because I read the book a little bit, I skimmed through it. I didn't want to look too much into it, but after you got through certain parts, I kind of like go back in because I'm curious.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
With D&D, with most, role-playing systems, you can do whatever the hell you want. Like, if I'm running late and I'm having a rough week and I don't have time to really prep a game, I would never let the team down. I'd always show up, always ready to play, because I know at any given point the players are going to do something ridiculous and it's going to take it out of whatever the story is anyway, and shit's going to go sideways. That said, I know I can kind of 1 or 2 more rooms right the ship and get you back to, we can hit the go-home moment. We're supposed to hit that go-home moment.
Yeah.
Masks, like, that's what I love about, granted, that's what I love about, like, D&D, like, especially 5th edition D&D. Anyone could buy the book, anyone could open it up, and you could run a basic game and people will have fun.
Yeah.
Masks is like working your way up to heavyweight. You're not going to have the same experience. And after playing it for a year and a half with you, it's one of those things I was like, man, maybe I could run a one-shot of something like this. But that's what I would do. I'd have to run a basic Cthulhu one-shot. Like, Masks is just so thick.
There were sessions where nothing happened, where you talked to 2 people and that was it.
Yeah.
It's crazy to be able to sustain that and also balance it with the fact that it's super deadly. And you guys have been playing for a while, so that made you super cautious. So that just sort of extended everything. To your benefit, if you weren't like that, I could have killed more of you. The relatively low casualty count, all things considered.
Well, I think for us in the game, so, we've went through a lot of characters. I went through a lot of characters.
You went through the most characters.
I went through a lot of characters, but when our friend Ed's character, Charlie Tippett, died... That was the exact moment in the game where everybody started playing a lot more cautious. Now, my style of play, I'm a ham-fisted detective. I'm fast, I'm loose. I want to be the aggressor to keep the game moving along, because that's my role on the team.
Yeah.
That said, when Charlie Tippett died, and he died by like sitting in a chair.
Yeah.
And had his soul like ripped out of his body.
The perfect thing about that is there was no antagonism in that moment. He was tired. He was a pain in the ass. So he was going to be like, well, there's a big chair here. I'm going to sit in it. And he died in the most dramatic fashion possible.
So that definitely made everyone a wee bit more careful about how they can die. Like, even in the big finish, when we are at what I would call was the boss fight of the game, we were going for broke, but we were still like, are we sure we want to do this?
Yeah.
Because, you could die.
Yeah.
And you could die 1,000 different ways in Masks of Nyarlathotep. Yeah.
There you go. You got it.
So, Stu, let's wrap up the talk on Masks. Any final thoughts that you have?
My main thing is you should play it. You should find somebody who's run it before to run it for you rather than to run it yourself. One of my greatest regrets in role-playing is that I've never played Masks of Nyarlathotep, and I certainly can't now because I know it by heart.
You read the book 18 times, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no getting past you.
Yeah.
Now, what if you are a first-timer and you want to play something in this style? What do you recommend? You said there was a D&D thing that they could probably do to get a little more used to running a game like Masks.
Yeah, I would have to think about specifics. I could maybe put that in the show notes. I would just try and play one-shot Call of Cthulhu Adventures for a while before you work up to it.
All right, well, check the show notes for that, and we are going to wrap up in a few minutes. Dude, why don't you tell me about what you're excited about this week?
What am I excited about? Boy, howdy. This game, Spire, The City Must Fall. I love it. I love it so much. Somebody I follow on Twitter, Grant Howitt, had posted a call for writers for RPGs. Like, we did this thing and we need writers. I was like, I'll look at that. Maybe.
You're like, I am a writer.
Yeah, and I like RPGs, so maybe that's something that I could do. And it's for this game called Spire, and I've never heard of this game. So I was just like, all right, well, I'll check it out. I'll buy it. So this book comes. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. It's one of those games that the idea is great. It's married to fantastic art, And the concept is so tight. The elevator pitch for the game is so tight that it's so good.
What's the elevator pitch?
The elevator pitch is that you are playing Drow. So there's a lot of preconceptions about Drow, but this is a total reimagining of Drow. The Drow have lived for centuries in the city called the Spire. It's a big, weird, tall city. There's lots of districts. It's a vertical city. It's basically just a tower that has a city inside of it.
So not Menzoberranzan?
Not Menzoberranzan. A couple hundred years ago, the High Elves came in, conquered them, became a ruling class. The Drow are downtrodden and abused. They are an oppressed people. You're a member of an oppressed people, and you are gathering together with other crazy Drow to try and fight the man.
Okay.
We're going to start a revolution. And then all the art has a vague propaganda poster feel. There's guys waving flags and great urban fantasy, dare I say, steampunk, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it all comes together and works. There's like all these weird gods and things are gnarly and everybody's wearing masks and it's so good. It's so good. I hate Drow. Drow are stupid. They're boring. They're overpowered in D&D. And this is something that, surprisingly to me, is Drow aren't part of D&D's sort of corporate identity, like Beholders and Grell, and like certain monsters are just, they don't let you play with them. Drow are part of the open gaming license, apparently, so that they could use this. And they reinterpret Drow into a way that is fantastic and interesting and timely, and I so want to play this game.
Well, I guess we know what's next on the chopping block. What company puts it out?
Rowan, Rook, and Deckard. I believe they're based out of England. It's by Grant Howitt and Christopher Taylor. I believe the hardcover is like $40.
I'm looking at it from across the table right now, folks. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's really cool looking.
The system is sort of like Tales from the Loop in the way it's structured. It's got more complicated layers for combat. It's a little more rigid, a little less flexible, but that framework is there to support you in getting into this really revolutionary mindset.
Cool. So I'm definitely looking forward to playing that in the future.
Cool.
You've sold me with the elevator pitch. So that's episode 6 of the Vintage RPG podcast.
6.
Jesus. I know.
Man, we're trucking along.
That's it, man. Wait till we get to 666.
Oh, my goodness.
We're a little ways off from
Yeah.
that. So, Stu, where can people find you?
You can always find me on Instagram at VintageRPG. You can find me on Unwinnable.com, writing stuff and thinking things.
You can find me at MyTaiTV.com, where every week we upload a new episode of my podcast, My Tai Happy Hour. You can also find me on Twitter at Hambreaker, where I tweet exclusively about Dungeons and Dragons, professional wrestling, cute animals, and retweet the Bullet Club. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dead Go West. Art by Schaefer Brown. Feel free to pass any show ideas or corrections along to VintageRPG at Unwinnable.com. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast.